Just because you took the best picture of your career doesn't mean other people are going to care, doesn't mean other people are going to give you anything for it. So you want to be a photographer? You want to get paid to take pictures? You want a life in photography? You want all of the accolades and the fame and the fortune and everything that comes with it? Well, using some of the story from Joe McNally in his book over here, as well as my personal lived experiences, I don't want to be the one to gatekeep you from becoming a photographer by any means, but I do want to stand at that gate and make sure that you really want to come in. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sergio and I'm a commercial photographer here in Victoria, BC. I've been shooting a little over a decade now, and one thing that's for certain is that nothing is for certain. I've been shooting long enough to know that there's no two paths that are identical. There's not even 2 days in photography that are identical. But that was the whole point of why I got into this in the first place. I was staring down the barrel of a mundane 9 to 5, like working in a lab, just trying to do the same thing over and over every day, the stability that comes with that. And for some reason, I didn't want any of it. Now, if you don't know about it yet, The Real Deal is a Joe McNally book that covers his entire career as a photographer from start to finish, with field notes, with how he was feeling in the time, as well as the photos that were associated with that time and those stories. It's a wonderful read, and I highly suggest it to any photographer that's trying to make a living, especially in today's day and age. But I think there's still a lot of overlap between the 70s and 80s when Joe was coming up versus nowadays today. And I say that because I'm reading some of these stories and I'm like, man, I went through the exact same thing. Even though we've got AI nowadays and we've got all of these crazy technologies that didn't exist back then, the struggles and the problems that we have as full-time freelancers still have a lot of overlap. It's nice to just have like a sounding board so that you don't feel like you're alone in your thoughts and whatever. And I'm just here to tell you that you're not alone. Joe mentions here at one point, he goes, "So on the day I got my first job as a photographer, I blew the job I was shooting. I should have taken that as a sign, perhaps a warning. Failure will be with you always, grasshopper." And as much as, sure, yeah, that might have been at the early parts of his career, and even by early, I mean he's already a working photographer for a news magazine, talking about how failure will always be with him. And it's funny because, yeah, I've been shooting for a little over a decade, and I don't think I'm like the best by any means. I don't think that I hit the mark every time. So that still happens at this point in my career as well, and I think it will always happen forever and ever and ever. This is a creative field. There's no like real right or wrong answers. It's always about a feeling and emotion, and people change on a day-to-day basis, and that's just part of it. You got to roll with those punches. You got to be able to take a look at your work from a third person point of view. Like, you have to look at your stuff without the personal connection to it. You're working with other people now, they have to be happy. You're working for magazines and editors and publishers. All of those people have to be happy with what it is that you're creating, not just you anymore. If you want to enjoy photography for the sake of enjoying photography, taking photos that you love taking, looking back at them and staring at them and being like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened, or whatever it is that you enjoy so much about photography, that's not what being a working photographer is at all. Like, you have to find those pockets within it, but that's not what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We are tradesmen, and our tools, our tool belt just happens to have a camera and some lenses in it. But it's not any different than a mechanic or a hairstylist or what have you. Actually, if you take that hairstylist thing and if you go get a haircut and you don't like the result, you just don't end up going back to that hairstylist. And that's the same thing with a lot of your clients when they're booking you as a photographer. There's a million other people that they could be hiring other than you. And if you want to be the person that they come back to, you have to make them happy. You don't have to make the best haircut that you've ever made. You don't have to do a haircut that you're going to apply to some hair competition so that you win some whatever. This is about making your client happy so that they book with you a second time. I love Joe's teachings in this book because he talks a lot about being a grunt worker and trying just to do everything in order to be a photographer. He talks about moving to New York and living with cockroaches and living above a theater that was constantly rumbling and just, a very bleak, living situation. But he was a photographer or aspiring photographer in New York City in the 70s, and that's everything he wanted. And that's what he focused on. I actually just did a call out on my Instagram for some assistance and some help that I needed for a big shoot that I just had recently. And one of the people that reached out was just so overly enthused and had so much drive and just ambition that I was just like, hey, yeah, you're great. I don't know what to expect. from this, but I think that just your drive and your enthusiasm is what's going to carry you. And it's not about, trying to make all of those tiny little ends meet. It's not about trying to make an extra $300 or an extra $800 or an extra this or that or the other, or be like, oh, I'm worth this or I'm worth that. It's like, no, it's time, experience on set with other people and other industry creatives in your area that will help you progress and blossom. Don't know if I'm going to keep that part. Joe got a job as a copywriter in New York's biggest photo newspaper. And that was a big deal at the time, but he was basically just an assistant. He was running errands, he was going to get people's groceries, he was carrying film from a photographer to the lab, he was doing all of the grunt work. And it's not what any of us necessarily want. That's not what we aspire to do. When I first started out, I was a Sherpa for a wedding company. I basically just carried light stands all day for 18-hour days, and I had a huge smile on my face doing it. I was getting paid, 15 or 20 bucks an hour, and I'm like, man, that's an 18-hour day, that's so much money, and I get to be around cameras, and I get to be around whatever. Like, it was an experience that I was after, and I think that's what was important here with Joe as well. There are countless ways to make money in the world in general. If you choose to have photography be your sole source of income, just know that it's going to be an uphill battle. Just know that nobody else wants to pay you to do it because there's someone else that can do it for cheaper. And if you can put yourself in a position where you're like, I am that much better, that much more consistent, that much more enthused, that much happier, that much more willing, every situation that you put yourself in, that's how you get the next one. And that's all you need to worry about. All you need to worry about is that next job. Not about the entire career, not about, finishing your career, not about hitting the biggest milestone by next week. All you need to do is worry about that next job. And if you're currently working on a job, all you need to worry about is your current job. If you make your current job as good as you can, you'll get another one. That's how you focus on getting the next job. He realized at a very young age, luckily enough, I guess, maybe it's because you're in New York or what have you, but when you grow up in these situations where you're just friendly with everybody around you, and by growing up, I mean like it could be in your 20s and your 30s, and you could be at any stage in your life. But when you meet people and you're friendly with them and you keep them in your life and you realize that these people will grow and change just like your photography will, well, maybe in 10 years from now, one of those people will be head of an agency and they will need a photographer for something. Or maybe someone will be a newspaper editor and they will need a photographer for something. Or maybe somebody's going to get married and they will need a photographer for something. But the point is that you got to make those connections early on, and you got to focus on the people in your surroundings far more than the actual photography. I think a lot of us got into photography because it attracts maybe not a lonely person, but someone who doesn't necessarily need a whole bunch of friends in their surroundings. It attracts someone who just likes the thing and the escape from the everything around us. But once we step out from being hobbyist photographers and trying to make this as a career, as a job, we're businesses, and businesses have to be social. Businesses have to be engaged in their society and in their community, and the only way to do that is by actually engaging with the people in your community. It's not just about photos, it's not about posting on Instagram, it's not about any of that stuff. If you want to make it as a photographer, you have to put yourself out there because you're the self that's taking photos. It's not your camera, it's not your lenses, it's not your lights. You are taking photos, so you have to bring your best foot forward. You have to make sure that you're there as a person in your community so that people can always think of you when they need a photographer. That doesn't happen overnight. I know you're like, I'm doing that. But you're not realizing that you've been doing it for 6 months. You've been doing it for 4 years. You have to do it for your entire career. And there's going to be slow months. There's going to be slow periods. There's going to be periods where you question even doing this in the first place. But if you focus on the love of the craft and the ability to just do this, or the hope that you might be able to do this one day, that will keep your fire alive. That'll keep that drive alive. And I know I'm saying that with, the experience of not having any kids or real responsibilities. Joe, at this time in his life, when he was just still starting out and working out, he was living by himself in some dingy apartment. So it's like, if you can adjust your lifestyle to the money that's coming in, you might be okay as a freelancer. But if you think that you'll be always, 6 months from now I'll be making more money than I am now, and 5 years from now I'll be making more money than I am now, and thinking that you're always going up some corporate ladder, that's not the case. Unless you're a very good businessman. If you're a very good business person, then yeah, probably as you increase, as more time you put into this craft, the more it'll give back to you. But that's not why we got into photography. You didn't get into photography because you're some expert business person. You got into photography because you're a camera nerd, and that's fine. But in order to take those skills and apply them to being a full-time photographer, again, you're just a full-time business that happens to use cameras. One of the scary things about photography is that come up or that move up or that like, okay, well now I'm at this level, that means I'll never be at that level again. But that isn't the case. And there's a story here that Joe talks about. There was a newspaper strike, and there was a lot of little guerrilla newspapers that opened up, and he got a job because he had a friend of a friend, or someone he grew up with, that ended up managing that guerrilla newspaper. And he's like, look, I need photographers. I need pictures. I got nothing. I'm going to pay you more than you're making at your salaried job. And he was like, whoa, all right. Now I've made it. Now I've made it to that level. Like, oh, I just did a shoot with Nike or whatever. You know what I mean? Like he just got that next like milestone. He's like, oh, wow, okay, now it's ready. Now it's like, now I'm no longer green. Like here I am. I've arrived. And it was very short-lived because when the strike was over, he went back to being not just a staff photographer, but back into the lab, which originally is what he wanted. And then from the lab, because there was some photographers that got booted or downvoted from that big strike, from the money cuts that were happening, he then had to go back to being a copywriter. And he said, nah, I'm going to quit on the spot. In this book, at least, it does say that right after that, he got a job with the New York Times. And that's great. That's awesome. And that, I'm not saying that that's going to happen to all of you. But I am going to say that if you are comfortable in a space, it's not going to last long, no matter what that comfort is. And if you're uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable in a space, it also won't last long either. So just be aware that everything is somewhat temporary. Be aware that you will grow out of a certain thing and you will get into another thing. If you don't like where you are, it's a good thing. If you like where you are, don't be too comfortable. Just be aware that as a photographer, it's always changing. And if that's the point of what you want, if that's why you got into this, then that's a good thing. And it's finding those pockets of stability within that make you a lifetime career as a photographer. I think one of the things that Joe was doing that was very smart at this point in his career is that he was taking on jobs from a bunch of different articles and magazine publications. And it's not about just having, one job that pays you $100,000 a year and you're like, oh, now I'm a photographer because I take these pictures for this one publication. That publication goes under, you're screwed. So having all of these multiple sources of income are a great way to make sure that you'll have a lifetime as a career, or a lifetime as a photographer, a career as a photographer. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place today. You see here he goes, UPI used me a lot, which was necessary as their jobs paid just $50, which really reminds me like the Uber Eats jobs that I have now. I do them a lot because they don't really, but that was it. The Times was high rent at about $125 a pop. AP was somewhere in between. But see how he's working with these 3 different news publications. But given that my rent was $250, which in New York City, I apologized for everyone who's watching me from New York right now. But you can make a living if you stacked up enough of those in a week. And there's still some overlap to that today. Obviously, those numbers maybe have an extra 0 at the end of them. But there's still a very similar overlap today because clients are also paying a little bit more. Maybe not 10x more than they used to be, and maybe you'll have to have a few more jobs to actually pay that rent and maybe have a few less beers on the Friday night. But if you focus on actually being a photographer and just enjoying the fact that you're a photographer, it'll carry you through these slower, less paying times. Because it's not always like this. This is still very on in his career, and as much as it's real money, and let's say you put on an extra 0 on there, let's say it's $1,200 a pop, that's a good amount of money. But it's still not, like, oh, now I can retire. Like that's half a week's work for a lot of people, So like to put that work in to just getting, $1,000 from a client as a photographer, it's like, whoa, man, that's insane. I convinced someone to pay me $1,000. That's insane. But to do that, twice a week for a whole year, it's tough. It takes a lot of convincing. It takes a lot of work. So, it's diversifying that income as much as possible. And diversifying, he did. I was voracious. It was not unusual for me to shoot a job for UPI in the morning, knock back an AP job for lunch, and bounce out at night to shoot a celeb at Studio 54 to score another $50 for the UPI. And that's the thing about photography. You have to understand that this isn't a 9 to 5 grind. You go where you're needed and you go when you're needed, and you're going to shoot when you can. I pride myself in trying to be available as much as possible. And sure, it's nice to be able to say no to clients, and it's nice to be able to set boundaries and have your own, like, this is how I do things. But you also will end up shooting at weird times of the day. You'll be editing at 3 a.m. You'll be not following regular people's schedules. You'll miss birthdays, you'll miss events, you'll miss weddings, you'll miss all of these things. You might miss your children's birth if you aren't adamant on your own personal boundaries. As freelancers, we often forget that we are the freelancer behind the business, and we often take a back seat to the business. So I just want you to be a little bit more careful and mindful that it might happen that way. I love here he mentions it was nonstop, feverish, and fun. The realization that I had climbed my own small personal mountain wasn't attended by a gaggle of accolades for a magnificently rendered cover story or an invitation to join Magnum. Okay? Just because you took the best picture of your career doesn't mean other people are going to care, doesn't mean other people are going to give you anything for it. Just because you enter all of these crappy little Instagram awards, literally nobody's going to book you for them. If you're spending money to try to get seen by other people that are only other photographers, it's not going to do you any service. Being a photographer is about working with clients, pleasing the people around you. And that can be sports, that could be news, that could be products, that can be people, that can be any type of photography. But if someone is paying you to take photos, you have to make sure that they're happy. That's the end bottom line. And I think a lot of photographers get into this as selfish individuals, as like, I love photography, I love my photography, I love taking pictures, I want to take pictures. But the thing is, at a certain level, if you're making money as a photographer, it's because other people are trusting you to do the thing that they need, not the thing that you want and that you feel like. Even if they're like, I'll do whatever you want, it's still working for other people, doing things that they will use so that your photos can keep working for them so that you can actually make a living. But it's not going to be an easy living that you can just half-ass your way through. You're convincing people that you're worth their dollar, so you have to put in that groundwork to make sure that their money is well spent. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the one today. Joe is a great inspiration of mine, and I just wanted to share a little bit more of his story and maybe some of his photos here in the B-roll. So I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe leave a like on your way out and subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you in a couple days. Later.